Okay, hello, my friends. It is Tuesday, January 9th, and I have 10 big stories for you today. So the first is that the US is providing another aid package of 500 million, and this was at the Ramstein Group. Aid includes additional missiles for Ukraine's air defense, more ammunition, more air to ground missiles, and other equipment to support Ukraine's F-16s. Okay, a little bit more about that. Zelensky was there and he was speaking. Zelensky, the U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, other military representatives from 50 countries are in attendance. Main topics on the agenda is strengthening Ukraine's defense capabilities over the next 2 years. Look, they don't think that this is going to end right away, and neither do I, to maintain a credible deterrence. Zelensky gave a statement at the meeting about the cooperation of Ukraine with allies, and he's focused on stopping the cash flow, so the gas pipeline, the oil pipeline, things along those lines. For Putin's war effort through the sanctions is crucial to stopping the killing. Here's what Zelensky had to say while he was there.
Asking all our partners, especially the US and the EU, to turn up the heat on Russia's energy sector. Sanctions are needed against every element of Russian energy, and the Russian tanker fleet must be stopped. Russia's war budget for 2025 is 25% bigger than last year's. If we want to stop the killing, we have got to cut off Putin's cash flow.
Okay, yeah, and that's a really good point, and they're working at that, and I think this is an appropriate way to approach things too. Now, it still needs the missiles and the air defense and everything else, but that's also something that you can't ignore. Okay. 500 million in new aid we just talked about. Pentagon Chief Lloyd Austin has confirmed the release of the latest aid package to Ukraine from the Biden administration. Now, they're leaving something like 400 million or so, roughly, 400 billion on the table. Presidential drawdown authority is there, and Biden has not used it. I don't know that he'll use it before the end of his term, but we're talking like 11 days. Quote, this is Austin. Quote, if Putin swallows Ukraine, his appetite will only increase. If autocrats come to realize that democracies have chickened out, abandoned their interests, forgotten their principles, we will only see more land grabs. I think that's very fair. If tyrants realize that aggression pays off, we will only encourage more aggression, chaos, and war. Retreating will only incentivize more imperial aggression, said Lloyd Austin at the Ramstein meeting. Okay, he also said this, and I think this is very much worth sharing as well. There's a perception Russia has all the trump cards. It has advantages, but not total dominance, Austin said, warning that any Russian success will come at a high cost. Now, but see, that's the way that this has all been played so long. You're worried about degrading Russia rather than supporting Ukraine or making Ukraine win or putting them in a position to win. Meanwhile, Kaya Kallas is saying that the EU is ready to take the lead in supporting Ukraine if the US is not willing. Well, they may very well have to step up. We just don't know how Trump and the Trump administration will play this out. Okay, Hungarian former minister Peter Szijjártó hinted that Budapest would close Ukraine's path to the EU by stopping energy transit. Okay, so Budapest is going to, because they cut off the pipeline, Budapest is going to prevent Ukraine from joining the EU. That's what the foreign minister just said. He pointed to the obligation of Ukraine, which has signed an association agreement with the EU, quote, to contribute to EU's energy security by providing transportation routes. So forget security, like that you're being bombed and your people are dying and that sort of thing. We need Russian gas and oil. So, okay, I mean, there's that, and they can cut them off and prevent them from joining the EU. But I think your values are a little misplaced here. Okay, Anton Gerashenko posted this. The government of Armenia has approved the beginning of the country's accession to the EU. It will now be discussed in parliament. Armenia is a former USSR republic in the Caucasus and is long balanced between EU and Russia. Its ties with Moscow were very strong, but all that changed after Russia invaded Ukraine. Russia is no longer able to be a security provider for the neighborhood, so Armenia's gotten the message and going, maybe we should be doing that. Okay. We'll see how that plays out. I saw this and I thought, wow. Okay, in Russia, the Kremlin is reportedly contemplating to annex Belarus after the end of the war in Ukraine. Russia's imperialism as it is. Okay, so now this was actually an article in the Moscow Times. So it's not just somebody posting their own thought. So a couple lines here. Sources close to the presidential administration told Medusa that according to them, this could be presented as a deeper integration of the two states. Well, we're just, I mean, we're already kind of already integrated, so let's just go all the way. Now, in early 1990s, Lukashenko was actually saying this kind of thing, like, yeah, we should regenerate the former Soviet Union, these states, and so he was kind of the force behind the CTSO, and like he wanted a larger bloc, and Putin was like, yeah, you can join us as one of our oblasts, and he wanted nothing to do with that. Okay, this is an event, one of the interlocutors explained. However, he stipulated that the implementation of the scenario entirely depends on Alexander Lukashenko, and he clearly wants to remain a full-fledged dictator at this time. Okay, in December 2024, Lukashenko and Russian President Vladimir Putin signed an agreement on mutual security guarantees. The document defines, in particular, the obligations of the parties in the field of defense, protection, and sovereignty. It's kind of like the North Korean kind of thing, so they have this mutual defense pact, but it could go further. And I would guess that what you'll see is Russia and Belarus making more and more of these details, these kind of arrangements between them until just absorbing them will become very easy. That's just my guess. And remember, now Belarus is here on the map, and if Moscow swallows up Belarus and it becomes part of Russia itself, then Russia has moved toward NATO. Isn't that an interesting thought? Has gone right up to the borders of NATO. Now, don't they need a buffer zone? Wasn't Belarus supposed to be the buffer zone and Ukraine supposed to be a buffer zone? And here's how you can tell that they're making crap up, because that's not why they're doing it. Because this area here in Ukraine that is occupied shouldn't have become part of Russia proper if they needed a buffer zone. It should have just been called buffer land or something like that, and move everybody out, and then we just don't have any people there or something, whatever it is. Right? But that's not what they want. And so that's how you unearth whether this is true or not. Okay, Ben Hodges, likely to be true of every one of these Russian Shadow Fleet vessels. The EU refers to them as end-of-life ships, which is a good enough reason to stop and inspect them all. So the Finnish authorities, the reason that he's saying that, the Finnish authorities were finding alarming safety deficiencies on these Russian tankers. Well, of course, they're second tier, they're not kept up to speed, and okay, so that's another big story. Another big story. The Syrian authorities have refused to let a Russian evacuation ship slip into the Tartus naval base so that they could unload all their equipment and get out of Dodge. So for 4 days, according to OSINT, I said it right. Some of you corrected me when I spelled out OSINT. I know better. It is OSINT. When OSINT analysis have found that this Sparta 2 cargo ship has just been sitting out there and the Syrians won't let them in. We have other fish to fry. The Turkish armed forces are on alert because they may be fighting with the PKK, which is the Kurds, and the Turks don't like the Kurds, and the Kurds don't like the Turks, and that could kind of upend things in Syria, but we'll keep our eye on that. Now, meanwhile, Euromaidan Press put this out. Russia paid Taliban to target U.S. troops in Afghanistan in 2016 to 2019. According to this, Russian GRU reportedly offered $200,000 for each U.S. soldier killed, transferring funds by Afghan couriers who operated under the cover of gemstone trading. How about that? Now, we know that the Russians were against us in Afghanistan. Hey, we were against the Russians in Afghanistan. And this is Charlie Wilson's War. You can watch that movie to kind of get a sense of what was going on there. And, even Rambo 3, you probably haven't seen Rambo 3. You might have seen First Blood Part 1, and you might have seen Rambo. But Rambo 3 was actually a really interesting movie. It just had poor timing. It was 1988. It was actually, at the time of its release, Rambo 3 was the most expensive film ever made with a production budget of 58 to 63 million. But it happened to be released in 1988. It was just a year before the Berlin Wall was falling, and people weren't like as keen on killing the Russians, and we're rooting for Rambo working with the Taliban, that then after 2001 we'd go to fight for the next 20 years. It's a really bizarre thing how the world works. The Berlin Wall fell, people's mood changed, and yeah, that's where we are. But some old habits don't, old habits die hard. They don't just go away. And so there's still a tendency within Russia to be trying to grab more land. And that's where Putin is. And he's on limited time. Putin is too old for peace deals. It's now or never for him in Ukraine, says a U.S. security expert. Remember, he's 71. He doesn't have the luxury of playing the long game if he wants to make his name and grab this land under his watch. Now, there's another reason that Putin might be wanting this too. And we have to think not just in terms of raw land, but what's in the land. So this is Kirilo Shevchenko, and he's the former chief of the National Bank of Ukraine. So when he talks, I listen. Russia's war isn't just about borders, it's about resources. Ukraine likely lost another trove of white gold, a major lithium deposit. And so the stakes are high, not just for Ukraine's sovereignty, but for the future of the global green economy. Yeah, that's right. There are resources there, and they're trying to gobble them up. Now, Zelensky responded to Trump's statement about NATO and how I showed you this video yesterday. Trump saying the wrong things, kind of what Putin would want him to say about NATO. Yeah, they shouldn't join NATO, that sort of thing. But Zelensky said this, and I thought this was interesting. The president urged not to draw conclusions about U.S. policy in this matter, noting that Ukraine needs specific security guarantees. He said this, quote, "Do you remember when Ukraine was told that Patriot systems could be and are available only in NATO countries? Now we need to work and do everything to ensure that Ukraine receives security guarantees worthy of our people that could help stop Putin." That's right. Over time, they got things. It took way too long, but over time, they got things. Now, Michael McFall posted this. Kagan is right. Trump must decide between, and this is a quote from the Atlantic magazine, quote, "a humiliating strategic defeat on the global stage and immediately redoubling American support for Ukraine. The choice will determine not only the fate of Ukraine, but also the success of his presidency." I think that's right. I think Trump doesn't want to go down in history as letting the Russians have gotten one over on him, although he doesn't have an appetite for letting them join NATO. So we'll see how this plays out. Ben Hodges said this.
Shame on us that we have not done everything that we could to help Ukraine win. It's in our interest. This is not charity for Ukraine. This is in our strategic interest. And I think we are going to rue the day that we allowed Russia to continue doing what it's doing now when we...
That's right. We still have a chance to actually help. And yeah, now let's think about this. Just from a financial position, an AEI, that's American Enterprise Institute, a conservative think tank, just released this. A detailed budgetary projection and analysis from AEI finds that the aid the U.S. currently provides to Ukraine would be dwarfed by the cost of a victorious Russia. It would cost the U.S. another $800 billion over 5 years if Ukraine loses, because now you have to arm preparing for what Russia might do next. So it just makes sense to do this. Now, yesterday I was talking about this where I went on a long thing saying, look, Trump only speaks for effect. He doesn't mean it when he says, I'm going to end it in 24 hours. Well, this just came out yesterday. Trump expressed hope to end the war between Russia and Ukraine within 6 months. I hope to achieve this in half a year. Told you it's not going to happen on January 20th just because he's inaugurated. Now, his general that he's sending as his emissary, Keith Kellogg, to work this out, was saying this, and we want to listen to it.
I really do have a lot of confidence in his ability to actually get to a position where this war is actually over. And I think what people need to understand, he's not trying to give something to Putin or to the Russians. He's actually trying to save Ukraine and save their sovereignty. And he's going to make sure that it's equitable and that it's fair. And he said that repeatedly, both when Zelensky met him in Trump Tower and when he said it on his press conferences. So I think, I don't want to divulge anything that the president says or doesn't say because he speaks for himself. I do not speak for him. We've had an opportunity to talk about it. And we'll have more after the 20th of January when he's officially the president, not president-elect. So what we'll set the conditions for the president, and then he'll eventually get to a position where he'll be talking to President Putin and also President Zelensky as well. And I think they're going to come to a solvable solution in the near term. And when I say by the near term, I would like to set a goal on a personal level and professional level. I would say let's set it at 100 days and move our way back. and figure a way we can do this in the near term to make sure that the solution is solid, it's sustainable, and that this war ends to.
Okay,
I really
so
do.
100 days. So one's projecting 90 days. Trump was saying 6 months. Okay, so it's not going to happen immediately, and we know that. Now, Trump was also talking about Canada, tweeting this out. And again, you have to discount Trump when he's saying these things. Should he say these things? No. You have to discount him because he just does these kind of nutty things. And here we have a top Canadian politician that just urged 3 U.S. states to join Canada and get universal health care and no NRA. Okay, but that politician is also being hyperbolic. Like, he's not really seriously saying, hey guys, come on over here. It's not like that's not going to happen. We just have to understand that. But I did think that this was really interesting. Oleg Koster, I posted something that he put out the other day. He put out the I did a video based on him extracting all of the interview questions of Zelensky the other day. And he put out this 100% reciprocity, laugh out loud. And he's reposting someone saying, Ukraine will send 8 tanks to Canada to protect them from invasion. 2 more tanks are expected to be delivered within 3 months. Like, that's what it felt like to Ukrainians with the lack of support or how long the support was taking to get to them to defend themselves so that they could defend themselves against the Russians. Okay, other things are happening around the world. Here's a satellite image of burning California. So you've got to understand that there are going to be domestic priorities that are going to displace Ukrainian needs, and that's going to happen. And it's unfortunate, but this is the reality of what's going on there. And I hope that this gets tamped down, and then I hope we can deal with Ukraine as well. But I think that's a fair way of looking at what will actually happen on the ground. I'm not saying that I want it to last longer. I'm saying I think this is how it will go. Okay, last little thing. Joe Biden became a great-grandfather on January 8th. U.S. President's eldest granddaughter gave birth to a son, William. We are proud to introduce you to our great-grandson, William Brennan Neal IV, Jill Biden wrote. So congratulations, Mr. President. Now, again, I'm a Republican. I'm not a big fan of Biden, but this is a universal kind of human thing. So he got to see his great-grandson. That's awesome. All right, on that note, we'll end. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.